do have any questions during the session, please just pop it into the chat, and we have some time at the end for that. Otherwise, I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, so this recording will be made available on the council website. We'll talk a bit more about that, but just on the Have Your Say page, you should be able to see the recording after we've processed it and popped it up there. Yeah, this is the webinar for club and special license holders. There is a separate one that we already had this morning for on and off licenses, but both of these will be on the website. So the purpose of today is kind of twofold. Firstly, it's to explain explain possible changes that might be made to the local alcohol policy. And this has come from research and engagement with regulatory agencies and elected members and some stakeholders. And the second part is to get your feedback on the local alcohol policy, on these possible changes. Because if you have anything to say, you need to know, otherwise we don't know. So please, if you do have any feedback, just yell out. So a bit of a rundown of today. We're going to cover what is a local alcohol policy, just so that we're all on the same page. Share what's happened so far, so where we're up to in the process. Having an opportunity later on for you to provide feedback if you have any questions about any of the information that's been presented. And then, yeah, just want to emphasize that this is early on, so we are still creating the draft. There will be a chance for people from the whole community, license holders included, to have a say on the draft local alcohol policy later in the year. So this is still just creating that draft, and there will be another chance to have your say. So what is a local alcohol policy? Basically, council gets given the power to have a local alcohol policy through the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012. And the purpose of it basically is for communities to have their say about how alcohol is managed in their district. And the purpose really behind the Act is to ensure the sale, supply and consumption of alcohol is done safely and responsibly, and that alcohol-related harm is minimised. So that's what the local alcohol policy tries to do. Here you can see our little spider diagram. It is a complicated system where this local alcohol policy fits in. You can see it's there in the orange box. The District Licensing Committee and sometimes the Alcohol Regulatory Licensing Authority, or ALA, really has the final say in what happens to licenses, and the local alcohol policy just feeds into their decision.
Always got to find the unmute button. So for those of you who've seen the local alcohol policy that we have at the moment from 2015, it's not a huge document, and the main reason for that is because whilst the government sees this as a tool for local communities to feed into what their views are on alcohol licensing matters, the actual criteria or the actual parameters around that are quite limited. So the local alcohol policy is restricted to looking at issues around the location of licensed premises. So some examples there, where they can actually be, how close they can be to other licensed premises or other facilities within the community, and the issue of how many licenses can be granted or how many can be granted in particular areas. So that all fits into there. Maximum trading hours. So the Act does set some maximums, but if you have a local alcohol policy, then you're able to adapt those to suit your local environment. Discretionary conditions. So when a licensing committee is issuing a license, they can have regard to specific circumstances and add conditions that may be more appropriate to that particular license. So one example that we see quite often is a requirement around host responsibility plans, training for club committees and staff, and some of those sort of things which are designed to ensure the license is well managed. And one-way door restrictions is the fourth thing that the policy can have regard to. So you'll see our policy is set out by the type of license, and then within that, each of these are covered off. So like anything that government puts in place for councils to administer, there's a few parameters around how we are required to do that. So we were one of the first councils to adopt a local alcohol policy when the provisions first came in under the new Act. So the Act came in 2012-ish, I think it was late 2012. And then we worked through our process and adopted our policy in 2015. We're required to review them every 6 years. So that includes the question of whether we keep it. Because they are optional. We don't have to have a local alcohol policy. We have to consult with police, licensing inspectors and medical officers of health, being the main agencies involved in the licensing process and the enforcement. We have to consider the characteristics of the district. So that's obviously demographics, socioeconomic factors, the district plan provisions, and anything that might physically affect where licensed premises can be. And we have to consult obviously with other stakeholders, being yourselves as license holders and employees on licensed premises. So what's happened so far, as Meek has touched on, we're at very early stage here. So rather than going out with a draft for full public consultation, we are going out early to get feedback to inform the draft, which will then go out for formal consultation. So this is about trying to get our draft in a really good working state prior to that process. So because the LAP is quite old now, there's been quite a bit of research around what the current situation is. A lot has changed since the LAP came into force. Obviously there are economic changes, have been law changes and decisions by authorities and judges which affect some of the provisions. And at a more local level, we've had applications that have just shown that our current local alcohol policy is not up to speed. So the first decision for council is whether we keep the local alcohol policy or not. And if we do keep it, do we go ahead and make some changes? So the indication at this stage is we'll be keeping the local alcohol policy, and we'll be making changes based on consultation, including today's webinars. So as we touched on, it's just important to remember that this is early on. This is feeding into the draft. You're going to have another opportunity later on to make formal submissions once that draft is out there. And the other key thing to mention is that most of the impacts on any proposed changes will only impact new licensed premises, with the exception of any changes to trading hours or any one-way door policies. Those will both apply effectively as soon as the policy comes into force or when a license goes through its next renewal. But the geographic type stuff about where licensed premises can be and those sort of things, they will not impact existing licensees.
So we'll go over some of the proposed changes. So there's sort of three categories to this. There's the general changes that apply across all of the licenses. Most of these really aren't anything new. It's trying to clarify what is already there. So for example, added in quite a few definitions. These are not necessarily new definitions. It's things that are already in the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. They're just not in the local alcohol policy. So it's just to be very clear to license holders, to the District Licensing Committee and anyone else that might pick up this document, what it actually refers to. So for example, adding in the definition of alcohol, duty manager and remote sale. So not necessarily anything new, just making sure that we are all talking about the same thing by having the right definition in there. There's also a bit of clarifying wording and concepts that has come out over the years of the local alcohol policy being in effect that are a bit clunky and could do with a bit of streamlining. So for example, one of the wording concepts that we've tried to simplify is when it refers to licensed premises being located in areas that allow commercial activities. So instead of having that long sentence, simplifying it to permitted zone, which says exactly the same thing A permitted zone means a zone under the operative Waipa district plan where licensed premises are a permitted activity. So it's something that you're, it's already in place. It's just making very sure that we're talking about the same thing. Another general change that sits across all of the different types of licenses is the definition to sensitive facilities. So sensitive facilities, again, is a concept that's already in there. We've just changed the name of it a little bit. So a sensitive facility currently is a school, early childcare facility, place of worship. What we're proposing is including rehabilitation treatment centre, marae, and for off licenses only community facility. So these are areas that have to be regarded by the district licensing committee when licensed premises is being established. For club licenses, it's up to the district licensing committee what impact the club license would have on these places. For on licenses, off licenses, it's a bit more clear cut. Yeah, how close you can be to these. So we'll go into more specific proposed changes. So again, remember these are just draft ones. We're running it past you to see what you think. Club licenses. So first proposed change is you can see how this is structured is the black writing is what's currently in the local alcohol policy, and the red is where we're proposing to change it. So for one-way door policies, currently it's up to the district licensing committee if a one-way door policy is implemented or not. Proposing that one-way door policy must be applied on all nights, Monday to Sunday, starting at midnight, to any Class 1 club. So just breaking that down a bit, a Class 1 club, the definition for that, and this is something that comes out of the license, the risk rating system that is used when you apply for your license. It's all set out in the Act. A Class 1 club means a club that has or applied for a club license and has at least 1,000 members of purchase age, and in the opinion of the territorial authority, the council, operates any part of the premises in the nature of a tavern at any time. So it's actually quite limited who must impose this one-way door restriction. It's really just to bring it in line with the on licenses that will have a similar thing, and it avoids that staggered closing time. So, and which the police have indicated has been a real issue in Waipa. So it's just to bring it in line, but again, very, very limited as to who this actually impacts.
So the local alcohol policy also gives the licensing committee some guidance on what discretionary conditions they can apply to a license. So if there is a particular issue that they want to address, then they can apply a condition that manages that concern. So in terms of the club licensing space, some of the things that we see quite regularly are discussions around when duty managers should be on duty, conditions relating to the number of managers or staff in general that should be on duty at certain times, and requirements around CCTV. So they've all come up as issues during different application processes, and that's clarifying that the licensing committee is permitted to put conditions on a license that relate to some of these matters, provided that they ultimately have the focus of reducing alcohol related harm. So something you might see is that a simple condition that says a duty manager must be on duty, and then it'll specify the times, because there is some discretion in the Act for clubs as to when a manager has to be on the premises as opposed to on duty.
So the next section specifically applies to special licenses and any proposed changes that might be directed at special licenses. So it's mainly around discretionary conditions. So just on what Carl was saying, ultimately the district licensing committee will still have the final say, but we are just putting forward basically proposed discretionary conditions to try and manage issues that have arisen around special licenses. So just things like, for example, having an alcohol management plan. This will be for large scale events, so 400 people or more, having that in place. The types of vessels at these events, so toughened glass rather than glass that can shatter and cause extra damage. The number and kind of alcoholic beverages, that you have to engage with police, medical officer of health and licensing inspector to make sure that they are happy with how the event is going to be run. Queue management, sort of around bar areas inside the event and in and out of the event. Also staggered closing times of those bars, and then the requirements around security at the events. So that's basically it. So short and sweet. So those are the proposed changes. Again, we'd love to hear your feedback on any of those, because if we don't know, can't bring that feedback into it. The next step will be to take all the feedback from this engagement and our previous engagements, put it into a draft local alcohol policy, and that will be workshopped with the councillors and elected members, and also go through a legal review. And then the next step will be putting that draft out to the public so that anyone can have their say on whether this is going to work or not. So yeah, that will happen later in the year, probably after August. But yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback now, because it'll be good to know that the draft that we send out is actually pretty good, that people are happy with how it stands. So if you do have any feedback to incorporate, please do. And one of the ways you can do that is email us at haveyoursay@waipardc.gov.nz. This will be along with the slideshow up on our website under the Have Your Say little tab. But that's pretty much all of the information. So we'll see if you do have any questions, could you please pop those in the chat? And we have quite a bit of time, so if could unmute as well. If anyone has any questions, just yell out.
I just wanted to add there just very quickly that we've covered off the areas that at this stage look to possibly have some change, or where there's been suggestions of some change. But go back and have a look at the existing local alcohol policy as well, because we just want to be sure that if there's something in the current policy that is not working for you, or that you think needs to be changed, then we want to encompass that as well. So we've just picked up the changes that are being proposed to date, but go back and have a look at the areas that aren't being proposed to change to make sure that they're fit for purpose as well.
Oh, do we have any
yeah, I've got a quick question.
Yes, Steve.
Steve Monet. Yeah, just around clarification. I'm not sure whether it's on your radar or not, but clarification around BYO events on club licensed premises. We've found that there's just it's not entirely clear how those work, and whether the the policies around it, and we get sort of different feedback on how, if and how they are appropriate, and how they work. So I'm not sure whether that's part of your thinking, but it's just a little bit of feedback from sort of the wider alcohol policy, I guess.
No, it's a good point. BYO in general is quite problematic. So for clubs, there's the overarching, you can't have BYO on a club premise. But then you get into the debate of whether that applies just when the club is operating or at other times. And at the moment, there's a gap where a special license can't be issued for a BYO. So there are some things there which we've presented to the authority in our annual reporting as being things that we would like to see changed as well, because it seems to be an obvious gap. And at this stage that hasn't progressed, but no, that's a topic we can definitely have a look and see whether there is any scope of incorporating it into this process.
Cool, thank you.
Great question. Anyone else? There's nothing in the chat. Nope. Brilliant. Well, if there are no further questions, I guess I'll just leave the email up there for a little bit in case you do want to jot that down and reach out to us later. But otherwise, thank you very much for coming. I know it's all good to give up your time for something like this, so I really appreciate that. And yeah, please do reach out if there are any questions. The slideshow will be up on the council website under the little Have Your Say tab. So pop in there. There's lots of other associated documents as well. So like the current local alcohol policy, the background research that we did leading up to this point, all those things that council has to consider. So yeah, thank you very much for your time.